welcome to How to Ensure Success when Migrating from one marketplace tech to another. Really good to see people joining, and I hope you will learn a lot from this today. So just first of all, I don't want to spend too much time on me. I'm just going to be a moderator. I don't have that much experience with the migration process, but on the other hand, my two speakers do, and I will let them introduce themselves. So Freds, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm Ferenc Farkas. I'm the CTO of Russmedia Tech. Let me shortly introduce our company. Our company is a software development company. We are developing software as a service products in different areas like general classified, real estate, job platforms, all sort of, also car, for example. I'm working with Russmedia Tech since 8 years now, and I basically participated like around 20 migrations so far in this company. So I'm happy to be here and sharing you all the best practices that we learned on this way.
Thank you, and that's a lot of hands-on experiences that you can share with a lot of different companies. Edward, do you want to just quickly introduce Besedo and yourself?
Sure. So I'm Edward Klepp. I've been working for Besedo for 8 years. Besedo has been doing online content moderation for websites like classifieds, dating website, or sharing economy. Doing so, we use AI features or even manual moderation. And I've been working as an implementation manager for the last 2 years, so helping our clients in onboarding our tool, Implio, which moderates content either automatically or manually.
Thank you. And I know you've been with the company as long as me, right? So we've seen a lot. So just to set the stage for this before we go into the to the different pitfalls and examples from real life examples, I want to say, I just wanted to outline some tech trends for marketplaces right now. And this is based on things that we have seen both Russmedia and Besedo when working with clients over a decade, and kind of the evolution of what's going on tech-wise right now. So one of the main things is that we are seeing that rather than trying to build everything and trying to be everywhere, all of the bigger companies and also a lot of the smaller ones are focusing now on their core product, and they're really intensifying that focus. So before they might have had some side projects, etc., but now it's all about how can we take our offering and make it as unique as possible with as unique features as possible for our end users. And they're really like taking their dev teams and focusing all of their attention on that. And we see that across the board actually right now. Another thing is that the solutions that they have in place, they need to not only be scalable, but they also have to be adaptable because things change so much in the industry right now. You all probably know that marketplaces are moving away from just being lead generators to now having to have a lot of value-added services and being platforms where they're taking everything inside. So all of the solutions obviously need to be able to adhere to that, and they need to be able to scale like this when we actually have like boosted volumes because of growth. The third thing, and this is not just in the marketplace industry, that's across all industries, I would say, is that dev time is really, really expensive. It's hard to get good developers. It's incredibly hard to get enough developers. We did a survey, I think it was last year, when we were looking at the people attending ICMA, and the companies attending there to see how many of them were actually looking for developers, and almost all of the companies, marketplace companies attending were on an ongoing basis looking for new developers. So it's hard to fill those spots, and it's hard to find the time to actually do what I said in the first point, focus on the core product. And it's even harder if you then have to spread out and look at how you're developing other services or other part of your platforms, which is one of the reasons why a lot of these guys are now looking for partners like Russmedia, like us at Besedo, to help them with the features that are necessary, and that is absolutely vital that they are well created, but they don't actually have the kind of competitive advances. They need to focus on the features and the features that matters the most. And then finally, what we're seeing is that a lot of the big players, the ones that started out in the 90s, they are now looking at replacing the legacy tools because they are outdated and they're not working as optimally as they could. And which again is one of the reasons that we're seeing a lot of people come to us, a lot of the big players coming to us and saying, we built this entire back of it, but it's not flexible enough, it's not agile enough. We need something that is quicker and better. And we see that over the last, I would say, Edward, back me up here, but also over the last 2 years, we've seen this more and more, that a lot of the pioneers within the marketplace industry are coming to us with outdated legacy tools and want to replace it.
Yeah, and I mean it's quite a big issue when you turn into one of the main player in your country. I mean, it's been something built to work, but definitely not to scale at that stage. And yeah, they are struggling a lot, more than a lot really. And yeah, they do need to look into something like outside of the box, not just patching their tool, because that's not going to work for long.
Exactly, and it's interesting because it's actually just over the last couple of years that we've seen this. Before that, we didn't see the same need for that, but now it's really happening. So just finally, for this kind of slide and introduction, you need to update your tools, of course, on an ongoing basis, but you also need to do it right, because it can be really, really expensive, both time-wise and money-wise, and user experience-wise, to fail. And I'm sure both of my experts agree with that.
Yes.
Yes. So, great. So let's just move on before I give the word to our two experts, because those are the ones you really want to hear. We want to cover the 3 phases of migration, and we have divided it into pre-migration, on migration, and post-migration. And for each of these steps, we're going to have some recommendations on things that you need to do, and some real life examples of what can go wrong, what can go right, from clients that both Russmedia and we at Besedo have dealt with. So now I will stop talking. I will leave this to you. Edward, do you want to talk about creating a list?
Sure thing. Yes, that sounds like an easy thing to do, and indeed, when you think very simply, it's like you're gonna take your tech guys, your operation guy, maybe 1 or 2 project manager, 1 or 2 dev. But eventually, there are things that you might not want to miss. And I'm coming from ops, from operation. I was a moderator first, and definitely when you are planning to put in your moderator's hand a completely new tool, and when I say moderators, it could be 100 of them, so it might have a big impact on them. You might want to include what I'm going to say low-level employees, but eventually they are the one who's going to be working on that new tool. So eventually, if you want to make sure that things are at least they are on board with the change, that would be a great way to involve them and make them part of the transition. Transition is never easy for anyone, but it's even I'm going to say worse for operation, because they have their use and habits, and it's quite hard to break them. They've been working on like sometimes 10 years doing the same thing on the same tool, and obviously if you come up with something that's going to change and move everything, it's going to be a little bit hard to get used to it. So if you got them on board from the very beginning, it might help you a lot, and eventually they can also come up with some new solutions, new ideas that a COO might not have in mind, because he's not hands-on the product on a daily basis. So yeah, stakeholders obviously, but let's not forget small players that could eventually help you a lot, not forgetting anything, or eventually make things get better than it was supposed to be. And that's what we see usually. We'll go through that later.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a long list, but and it can take some time to have those initial meetings. I don't know, you do this as well, right, Friends?
Yeah, of course, we do it as we also migrating, for example, from one platform. You need also product owners, also some developers as well. If it comes to, for example, for the data transformation, which I will talk later. So also IT guys, if you need to do something, IT operations. So it's a lot of people involved actually in the migration process.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, one of the reasons people might not do this is because they feel, oh, those big meetings where everyone's talking, and It's going to be time consuming, but I think, you know, you guys will both agree that it's going to be a lot more time consuming if you have to kind of retract something because you've forgotten to include someone who was actually really involved or should have been involved in the project.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's easy to think like, yeah, a meeting with two people is going to be much faster. Let's just rush it and move on. But if you need to revert back to day one at some point because you missed some people and some inputs, that's not going to be very useful.
Yes, because usually the knowledge is shared somehow or spread between people, so it's not one people or two which knows everything in the system. So yeah.
I think that's great advice. Do you want to take the next part, friends, and start us on
yes,
that?
Of course. Well, business audit before you actually migrating, it's very important part. I have an example when it basically went wrong because we had a client in Hungary and market and we migrated to our solution, but then they realized that some features are missing because they are not did this audit. So it was quite hard time for us to basically catch up with the development and doing everything for them just to not lose a lot of money, basically, because they lose a lot of money daily basis because of these features. So it's a very important step that you have to make before you actually migrate. So.
And it's also something that can really negatively impact the user experience, right? If you have like both internally and externally.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, then they realized just after the migration, which was quite hard to manage.
And I think we do that as well, Edward, right? We spend a lot of time auditing.
Yeah, especially our tool, which is Implio, replaces usually the tool used by client, and eventually you need to make sure that for each button there is on the client side, Implio or our tool can replicate the same, can do the same. And the good thing though, if you do that to the size, to make sure that everything is like in line and it's compatible. Obviously, there are going to be some times where it's not 100% compatible. There's no way a tool can replace any other tool without some pieces missing. But that's not bad though, because it pushes a bit everyone to think outside the box and think, okay, this option that I had before, I don't have it now, but was that actually an option I really needed? And this audit process is also a great way to eventually stream down your own process, your initial process that might be too complicated because it's a legacy one that's been working for 10 years. No one really questioned it. That audit is a great way to start. Okay, do I really need all that, or should I maybe just drill down to a couple of those options that I need? And this helps a lot, both the transition process, but also eventually afterwards the operation, because things get easier, get clearer, and I mean, it's one of the things you see as a success of a good integration and a good transition.
Yeah, and again, as most of the things on this list, it can feel like it was a lot of wasted time just sitting and listing all of these things, but it's really, as Ferenc said, it can cost a lot more if you skip it.
Yes.
So we have the next point is review edge cases. Edward, do you wanna take that?
So that's directly linked kind of to the to make sure that to the audit of the business eventually, because those edge cases are the things that you will probably miss at that stage at the audit business, because this just doesn't happen so often that no one's really think about it, or it's not a big part of your operation, so you don't really think about it either. One of the examples we had, and that's something that impacted our client quite a lot, and us too eventually, was that you have this platform that requires moderation. So quite straightforward. So moderation is either you accept or you refuse the content. So you'd think that's it, that's moderation. But eventually, no, it goes a little bit further than that. And what it required, what one of the guy required among a full pool of moderators, was some sort of tool to perform fraud investigation. And so such options were missing from the new tool eventually, and that created a small period of time where eventually the client needed to stay on his own tech because it had these options, and while still being on the new tech. So it delayed a little bit the full transition. Eventually, we added that feature to the roadmap, and things were implemented, and that was the full transition was done. But for a certain amount of time, eventually, if you realize that you miss some edge cases, then you might need to rethink the transition. It might actually takes more time, or it might actually need to stay on the two tools at the same time, which is not ideal. If you want to transition, you want to transition once and for all. You don't want to have one step on one thing and another foot on something else. So it's a little bit annoying to realize that at a late stage.
Yeah, and I guess if you have done like a proper involvement of all stakeholders, if you've done a proper audit, then you should be covered in this case as well, because you will have someone going, hey, by the way, we have this that happens once every month or something like that restores
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
Ideally, yeah, if you didn't miss those first steps, then step 3 should be painless.
Do you have any examples of edge cases, Frans, that people might not think about?
Well, of course, one of the things which we saw that there are some hidden stuff, like for example, the client doesn't say that they have a problem in their site or something, but they want to be fixed after the migration, which is not, we are not aware of it. So this kind of edge cases has to be treated and openly discussed, and not hiding this kind of issues.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Be transparent.
Yes, absolutely.
So set success goals, Edward. This is also things where people have a tendency to go, nah.
Yeah, well, the easy way the easy way is like, okay, I have a tool that does this. I need my new tool to do exactly the same. That's the easy transition. I think, okay, that's a success goal, and that's it. I reach that point, and that's done. Well, yes and no. Yes, of course, if it does exactly the same thing, that's going to work perfectly fine. However, you need to keep in mind that even if the button that you had before is here also on that new tool, the process to reach that decision, or to reach that way of doing things might have changed. You might need to have a couple of extra clicks. You might need to have a couple of extra checks to perform before moderating content. So eventually, if your decision, if the process, the end of the process is the same, the process itself might have changed, and this could create some sort of delay in a lot of different things. And I'm particularly thinking of the client's KPI. So if you have a platform like a classified platform, you want your content to be moderated in, like, I don't know, 30 minutes an hour max. Eventually, if you change your moderation platform, it might impact the time that a moderator takes to moderate a content. So eventually, if you keep in mind that the end result is here, but with the same KPIs as before, then you're sure that's a good success goal. But you really need to keep in mind and all the other KPIs that goes within along with the technical achievement. Basically, it's not only a technical achievement. It's, you need to maintain the same level of quality, of efficiency, the same time. Yeah, at the same time it needs to perform a task. It's a bit more than just make sure that the buttons are here same way they were before.
Yeah, and I guess, again, you know, if you involve all of the stakeholders, you can in that meeting as well ask everyone to contribute with what is a success for you, because it might look different from a moderator point of view, or for in your case, friends, for the devs point of view.
Yeah, and also user experience, for example, it's very important. They want something better than they have obviously before, so it's always a goal for us as well.
Makes sense. Yeah. Time frame and roadmap. Edward, do you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah, sure thing. So obviously, I mean, all those tasks that you see here are very, very connected together. And one of the things you really want to make sure is that you stick to a certain roadmap that all of your partner can have a look at, so that each of the stages to end up with a successful migration are properly documented, and everyone can see who needs to do what and at what time. It's easy to think that, oh, that part's going to be taken care of someone. I'm pretty sure it's his job, right? But eventually, no, it might be more complicated than that. There might be some dependencies on people that needs to do something for you before or for another person. It's a bit more complicated. I mean, it's for all technical tasks anyway. It's that level of difficulty, because there's a lot of people involved, and more people involved there are, the more trickier and the more dependencies there are. So you want to make sure that this is really properly documented, ideally with a quite precise time frame, even though we all know with dev time it's always a little bit flexible, I'd say. So it's still important to keep in mind some sort of time frame to make sure that things don't go sideways, and with the proper documentation. Yeah, I think it's definitely key to make sure that everyone is doing his job, basically, his tasks.
Makes sense. And I know that the next point is data transformation, and it's a really important one, friends, that I wanted to talk about. But just before, because it's connected to this, I guess when you're doing the time frame and when you're doing the roadmap, it's really easy to also break it down into tasks. And I know you wanted to talk about checklists, friends. So I think maybe we can jump to that part, because they are kind of connected as well.
Yeah, I mean, also the time frame is quite important, because, for example, our clients make some marketing activity, for example, so they have to know that when to start sending emails, that now we switch to a new system, and so this kind of it's very important for the clients. Yeah. And yeah, basically, if I jump to the checklist now, checklist is very important. I think this is after the audit is basically this the first thing which you have to do, because and usually those checklists are also divided in the pre-migration, migration, post-migration parts. And the pre-migration, you basically have all this data transformation mapping stuff, which I will discuss. What you have to test, how you have to test with your live data. Then also you have on a migration, who should be involved, which are the steps that you have to make. And also on the post-migration, you have all these checkings afterwards, that you have the new system with the live data. And if it's more detailed, it's better, because I have an example here. For example, we had a client from the UK market that he had like 12 sites to migrate. And because we had a very good checklist, we managed to migrate them every 2 weeks, one website. So, and this is only because we had a very good checklist. Everyone was aware of it. What are the steps that you had to make? So it's a mandatory stuff, I would say.
And that's super impressive to manage to do that in 2 weeks. I don't think, if you haven't been part of that process, you might not completely understand how intricate it is, and how many kind of puzzle bits that has to fit together, and how many people's schedules have to be aligned, and how many small tasks has to be carried out exactly in the right order to make that happen. But yeah, I was super impressed when I heard that you managed to do that.
Yeah.
And let's just jump back to the data transformation, because this is huge.
Yes, I mean, when you migrate from, let's say, your former system to a new system, it's always be data transformation, because obviously the data is not stored in the same way on both systems. So you have to be aware how you transform your data, and you have to do it by entity. User profiles is different. You may need some additional data in the new system, for example, that you don't have, and you also have to decide, I need this data, it's a nice to have stuff, or I can live without the data. And for that, you need people that they really know the data behind it, maybe a database administrator, or people which have really in the project from the beginning, so they know how the data is structured there. For example, we had also a case when you have to migrate from different database engines to ours. So it's a huge process, but it's again something which you have to make, because your migration process is heavily depends on it, how you migrate the data. And yeah, so basically, and you also can have some data losses because of wrong data mappings. So it's very hard to roll back if you do something wrong with it. So it's a very important part.
Yeah, this is where you should really sink in some hours, make sure that this is done right.
Yes.
And the last one, I can see that we're spending a lot of time on this, but I think it's super important, because the prep phase is really important. So let's just take the plan for SEO contingency and then move on, so we manage to do this on time.
Yes, this is also related when you migrate from one web solution to another, because you obviously the link structure will not match from your old system to the new one. And if you care, and also everyone cares about the organic traffic which comes from the search engines, you have to make sure that all these links still works on the new system as well, making some kind of redirects. I have also here an example. One client told us that they started to migrate to one of our competitors. Then they realized that they lose all the traffic from search engines because of the bad SEO settings. So they just realized quickly and basically come to us, because we made a lot of migration with them already, and they were sure that we are doing good stuff with SEO. So it's very important then, because once you lose your ranking in Google, it's quite hard to get back. So you also have to think about it very much.
Yeah, redirects are super, super important.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Pitfalls to avoid during the migration phase. Edward, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. So it's really all about training, really. If you want to have people on board with their new tool that you're giving them, you really want to make sure that they're on board and they really want it. Of course, at the beginning, it will always start with like, oh yeah, but you can't do that. Oh, can you do that? Oh, our tool can do that, you know. And that was exactly the case. The client we onboarded, and that client at first highlighted the things that were missing, because obviously there's no such tool as as a tool that replaces everything with all the good features. It doesn't exist. There's always things missing. And so at first it started like that. Okay, there's this missing. But by the end of the meeting, by going through all the details and work around and solution that this our new tool could bring them, what started as a one project solution ended up in, okay, we're going to consider that tool for all our moderation needs. And that's where we are today. Thanks to training that at first seemed like, okay, it's going to be hard to have them on board, but at the end of the day, if you do that properly with a lot of details and considering their needs and their issues, their challenges, then you will meet them halfway, and eventually it's going to be the solutions you will need. And that's what we're seeing today with that particular client. I'm really confident that's going to be their new moderation tool anytime soon, really.
And this is also to make sure that, because even if the new tool is better on all fronts, people still need to be taught how to use it to be truly efficient, right? That's, I mean, it goes without saying. And I guess it's the same when you're doing a migration on the platform. You need people to understand how the back office works, and you need your users as well to understand how the new interface looks and works before it's actually fully optimal, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the same as basically. It's a very important way, because the people usually working with the same tool like years now, and they have to learn something new. So it's very, very important to know the tool itself. Yeah.
So we have a point here about the test migration with live data, and I think this is again super, super important to actually implement. Ferenc, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, of course. So basically, once you have everything prepared, mappings, data transformation, everything, you need basically to test out with the live data, because then you can see also the performance of the new tool with all the data that you have. You can also have better test cases when you have to test the system. So it's very important, even if the system is not public, it's a private, and you get just basically test with your clients. But it's very important to have this live data migrated. You also can find out the timings, for example, how much will take the migration itself, because you have all the live data that you have. So it's a very important step.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also less things break just in case something goes wrong, right?
Exactly.
If it's just a sample.
Yeah, basically you catch them early in stage, so we are not after migration, which is the best case. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the final point on the migration, which I think is super important, and it should be super easy because everyone has been involved from the beginning, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. Make sure all parties are present on migration date.
Yeah, it's about logistics somehow, because you have to make everyone can attend to the migration, and basically a lot of from a lot of parts you need for example, testers to test after the migration with live data. You also need some IT guys to switch some servers or some stuffs around. So you need from each department a responsible tech people or product owners.
And I would say one thing, now my daughter is sick today, for instance, and I had to make a backup plans if I hadn't been able to attend. And I guess it's the same with migration. Make sure that there's a second in command that can take over just in case something happens in real life.
Exactly. Or at least announce before that you basically postpone the migration for some reason, or it's very important.
Yeah. So let's move on. And actually, I just want to wrap up this slide by saying that it's interesting to see how much there is in the pre-migration, and then on migration. It's only 3 points, but it's because all of the preparation, if you've done it correctly, then this should be fairly smooth sailing in the on migration part, right?
Ideally, yeah. 70-80% of the work is done during the pre-migration phase, obviously, and that's where all the issues are going to rise up. Actually, or most of the issues would be during preparation. Here, the issue that you can do during the migration is either it works or not, and it's as easy as that. And if it doesn't work, you're back to pre-migration phase anyway. So.
Good point. So once we have done the migration, what do you have to look at post implementation to get the most out of the new tool then?
I'll take that one. So the first one is checking performances on the new tool with migrated data. Obviously, we want to see something that looks like what you had before. And we discussed that earlier. It's really important to consider all the different metrics that are attached to that because the tool might work, all things technically work, but the processes might take longer. The understanding of your end user might be scrambled. You might need to rethink how you should onboard your users, how you should present those new features or this new tool. It's really important to make sure that eventually you end up with the same either interest from your user or same operation efficiency from your operations. We have a good example of this Asian marketplace where the efficiency went up quite a lot once on the new platform, especially on the hard moderation cases, which are mainly fraud, basically. That new tool allowed them to handle those much faster than before. And this is quite at the end of the line of the migration eventually, but it's important to still have a look at those.
And it's often a kind of a ramp-up period as well, as we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, someone with a new tool in his hands is not going to take it 100% on first day. It's going to take a couple of days, months. It really depends on how much different the new tool or the migration went. But ideally, yeah, keep in mind that don't compare the metrics from day one of the migration with the last day of your previous tool, because that's not going to make sense. But take time to make sure that the ramp up is steady and it is happening also, because it could be that it's not happening and there's something wrong. But make sure that at some point you reach the same metrics than you used to have before.
Yeah, Ferenc, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I'm just agreeing with the performance in our side. It's also very important, and yeah, especially when it comes with the new live data, you have to check monitoring everything is working, and when the clients actually comes and starts to use your tool, then you have to realize what is going good, what is going bad. So, and you have to react fast actually, because we know that after migration there is 2-3 weeks that you might expect some issues to come up, and you have to react fast. So it's a very important part as well to keep an eye on everything. It's not end on the migration date, that's for sure.
Exactly. You can't just go done.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. No.
One thing you should wait is for the edge cases to arise, and once those arrive and it's working, that's probably where you can say, okay, it's working at the end.
Yeah. So we kind of already touched about it, but check for possible issues. Do you have any good tips here on how to do that?
I have one example in mind, and this was done on one of those old French classified where a change was implemented, and it kind of made sense at the end, and technically it worked really super smoothly. It was implemented in in very short time. But the end users, so the user using that platform, just freaked out once they saw that, and eventually they basically they missed the idea of having someone from marketing having a look at that, because when you realize the mistake that was done for the end user, it was like, oh yeah, it's actually pretty obvious, sorry, and then they had to revert back to the change to the previous stage, and it was a bit silly because when you think about that, it was like, yeah, it's so obvious, and still it's one of the examples that one wrong stakeholder that was not involved, one stakeholder that wasn't involved, and one testing that wasn't done on the end user side, and eventually this came up to that situation. It wasn't a big issue though in the end, but still, it's like kind of a shame to plan for a big change like that, and eventually it's abandoned.
Yeah, I think maybe the best you can do is just keep an eye on all of the kind of forum and app reviews and customer support, your inbox, and then also, of course, talk to the users of the tool and see how their kind of perception is. That's how you will see issues.
Yeah.
Friends, I guess you see that as well.
Yes, of course, and we are prepared for this. After the migration, it's always coming support stuff. People does not understand something, so you have to react fast and be there for them actually.
Yeah, and I think we already touched on check the metrics from your former platform compared to the new one. So let's just skip to the last one here. Rethink and document best practices.
So yeah, that's a really quite important part, and it's quite important to make sure this process is happening. Basically, when you change to a new tool, you have a chance to start fresh, to just have something completely new and think outside the box and forget what you've done for the last couple of years. It can be seen as a pain in the ass for some operation related personnel. However, it's actually kind of a chance if you take a step back and think, okay, I used to do things like that way before. Now I can do things that way. Is it better? Is it worse? Eventually, they're gonna see it's better. It's a way to make sure things are either simpler, easier. We had that client that basically that is rethinking his moderation process to accommodate the new tool, and it ended up in a much smoother process, much simpler, less cross decision, overlapping decisions that made the user experience kind of confusing in the end. So that was kind of their chance. They took it, and now they have a moderation process that is much cleaner for the end user and much easier to understand. Eventually, this is going to have an impact also on the traffic eventually, because their website all of a sudden, thanks to that new tool, became much easier to use, and that's all we can hope for when you change your tool. So yeah, start fresh is a chance. It can be a little bit annoying, but eventually, if you document that and understand that it's going to have a good impact, you should really pay attention to that.
Is that also something you do, friends, like advise customers to rethink the customer journey or things like that when they are moving platform as well?
Of course, we are also collecting this kind of input from them as well. What I want to point out that we also doing this kind of, let's say, retrospective meetings after each migration, that we define our process, because you cannot have, let's say, a bulletproof process from the beginning. So you also have to define this, and we know what was wrong, what was good on the migration. It's also very important, I would say, to define.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay, so last slide is a summary, but I think, you know, if you guys listening in, you take away 3 things from this, this would be it. So the 3 most important steps to make sure that the migration transition is smooth. What is that, if I ask my 2 experts here?
So in the discovery phase, it's a very important part. This is the most important part. As we said, the migration, basically, the migration date itself, it's not too much, but the preparation before, it's the vital part. You need to involve a lot of people in the process and make sure that everyone who has something to say is there to discuss. Then, of course, you need to know the feature sets. It's very important to not fail after the migration. And the good data transformation spend a lot of time on it because it's worth, and basically it's a very important part. Yeah, and next.
Yeah, second point would be like make sure you have a plan. Sounds obvious, but eventually you have a huge checklist to make sure that things are ticked out of that, and you wanna follow that. And it's not about only checklists, but also the time frame attached to it. So once you have this proper timeline with the different tasks of that checklist attached to it, then you're sure you can just follow that, and eventually you will reach your goal. Second thing is rethink your processes. As we said a little bit earlier, it's a great way to make sure that your processes, the way you used to do things, are improved basically thanks to that transition. That's what that's your end goal, your end objective. So think about that checklist and attach to that a timeline. And while you're doing that, keep in mind that your processes needs eventually to be optimized, and think outside the box because it's going to change, and don't be afraid of that change. Just embrace it and optimize along the way. That's the best chance you get to do that.
And the last one is about testing with live data. It's very important. This way you can ensure that you have a good migration process. You can catch issues before actually migrating and present to your clients. So it's a very important phase to make it. Of course, you have to check your goals if it's fulfilled the new system, and there is also possible fixes and adjustments just basically before the migration. So basically try to have all the fixes, all the adjustments before the migration. Afterwards, kind of pain.
Sounds really good. So I'm gonna share our poll, but I think now is also a good time for everyone listening in to ask any questions, because we are gonna be we got a little bit over time. But if you have any questions, ask them now. This is I want to say once in a lifetime chance to ask two migration experts any questions you may have. So on the right hand side of your screen, you should see like a pane where you can put in questions. And while you just think about that and add anything you have, and no question is too stupid. This is a really tough process. So anything that you are wondering, I will share this poll in the same time. So I think you should be able to see the poll now, and you can see that we have 25% of the people listening in who are not currently looking at migrating, but 75% of you are, which means that 75% of you should have a lot of questions, I think, about this this process. So let me hear them now if you have anything. Let's see. I have one here. Ferenc, this is one is for you. You mentioned that we should keep all the important stakeholders involved. Who are all the involved all the important stakeholders?
Well, it depends on it's quite hard to say, but for example, project owner who knows the system for sure, that you need the people who is using the system on daily basis. They need to be involved because they know the best the system. Also, if you have to do data transformation, people who actually are basically build the system, or they are the database administrators, because you also need to communicate with them so yeah, and testers if they have to test the system with the live data. So it's quite hard to say how many people, but basically try to have from each department someone involved in this.
And I think just to follow up on this, out of curiosity, is there anyone that people like regularly forget that they should invite? This is a question to both of you.
Well, one thing, I mean, I gave an example earlier, and but it happened more than once. The marketing guys, and I think Ferenc, you mentioned that at some point. If you have some marketing campaign happening, if you know that something's going to happen on the end user side, and obviously the tech guys won't know that, and you really need marketing or some sort of people representing that department to make sure that you know where you're in. what context you're bringing these changes in, and it might make a bit of a difference for the users, and you don't want to make too much difference for the users. So.
Yes, actually, this is what you said, Edward. This is one of the cases that we had with the marketing, because they prepare some campaigns before, and they have to know basically when they can start it, and basically you have to involve them also in the process. Just they know when to send and what to send to the client, so it's very important. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is just on top of my head, but I could also imagine that there might be some people who are reliant on certain reports or something that has automatically been sent out from the legacy tool, and no one is really thinking about the fact that they still need them. So maybe, I don't know, finance or management groups who will be like, where's my report, and be like, oh, we forgot that should have gotten.
Also can happen, yes.
Yeah. I have one question more now, and that will be the last one, because we are running out of time here. Should the end users of the system be involved during the investigation stage?
Well, I would tend to say yes, but eventually, if you do that, they might switch the focus from what was the plan initially. My understanding is that if you want to implement a change, it's because you have like either financial or technical issues, or you want something that will solve one of precise issue. If you involve an end user, this will basically bring another layer of requirements that eventually you want to tackle at a rather later stage, because eventually you want the change to not be completely open to everyone's suggestion, because then you won't get away with that change. So it's not going to fit everyone's need. It's impossible. So you have to gradually involve people, I would say.
Otherwise, you end up with feature creep, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the migration could take much more than you expected, because, as you said, you run out of focus, and it's not the case.
Super, but I guess end users will still need to be involved at some stage early on to just make sure that you are covering the needs, but maybe not in the very, very beginning when you're putting up the scope of the project.
Exactly.
Great, thank you guys. I just want to round off by saying, if you want to talk to either Russmedia or Besedo about migrating to one of our tools, here's some contact details for us, and you can follow us as well on Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc. And after this webinar, we're going to send out both a kind of cheat sheet where we have collected all of these steps with some more information based on the feedback from both Ferenc and Edward. So you should get that in your mail, and we will also send out, Russmedia is going to send out the recording once we're done editing it. So first of all, thank you so much to everyone who listened in. I hope this has been super, super valuable for us, for you. And thank you so much, Ferenc and Edward, for sharing your insights. It was really exciting to have you here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you very much, Sigrid.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.